I'd like to first introduce Justin to you.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here with you guys. So my name is Justin Slagle. I've been at Microsoft for a couple of years now. I, like you guys, was a Microsoft partner before I joined. I owned a training company called Quick Start. We had 10 locations in the West and then sold the company and came over to Microsoft. So I now run a program called Microsoft Community Connections for the Western US. How many of you guys are MCC partners? Okay, good. So hopefully by the end of the day, a few more of you will be. But I'll be talking to you guys a lot about sales and marketing. And then I do have counterparts. So how many of you guys are West Region partners? Couple, okay, and then I have counterparts. So I'll talk to you guys a lot about some cool things that we're doing in sales and marketing. And then if you have some questions and you're not a West Region partner, I'll introduce you to my counterparts.
Great, and a lot of familiar faces from last time, but my name is Johnny Schurenberg. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager on the Microsoft team. Maritza, JJ, and myself make up the three legs of the stool that support the Microsoft business at Tech Data in the US. And my role is really focused on trying to help drive demand and help get the information to you and so that you're able to have velocity with your sales. And so if there's ever anything you need along those lines, you know, we've got just oodles of resources, sometimes almost too many resources. So if you just don't know where to look, you know, that's certainly something I can do. And throughout the day, I'll be handing out some different materials and stuff like that for you to take back to your business and hopefully help grow your business. So thanks for coming today, guys.
Johnny is the money man. Johnny is the money man. He controls our marketing budget, right, our demand budget. So he's definitely a good guy to get to know.
Hey everyone, my name is JJ Antiquin. I know I've met a lot of you before, and it's good to see you all again. I am responsible for the technical strategy at Tech Data, and that involves readiness for not only the sales reps with the Microsoft team, and also you may hear me on some of the TD Cloud calls or Tech Select webcasts as well. So I'm here to make sure that Tech Data is enabled and ready to support you guys.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. So what we'd like to do is kind of go around the room and have you all introduce yourselves. So your name, your company name, what is your favorite sport, and what is your one thing that you want to get out of today that you want to take back to your team members?
Bob Prince, NetSys Plus in Sioux City, Iowa. My favorite sport is track, about 50 pounds ago, if you get that message, right? And I'm here to learn more about Azure specifically, so.
That's to the guy who's
And
eating.
Joe has his mouth full of food, right?
I'm Joseph Law from outside Philly, Tech Builders. My favorite sport is being a couch potato. I love the gravity well of my couch. Other than that, I like scuba diving. I want to see how Microsoft is presenting a unified front for the cloud, because right now I see it as a bunch of separate services that don't seem to play together, or they play together with a lot of work.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'm Mark Harrison, Silicon East, Central New Jersey, and the only time you'll get me to a sports arena is for a rock concert. We've done quite a job with Microsoft licensing and with Office 365. We haven't done anything with Azure, and my interest today is to find out if there really is an opportunity for us.
My name is Gail Klein, also from Silicon East. My favorite sport is hockey, New York Rangers. And also, I'd like to learn more about Azure and what it's about.
My name is Jim Kramer from Louisville, Kentucky, Kramer Consulting. And favorite sport would be field hockey, a little bit different. As far as this software is concerned, I've been a partner for 19 years with Tech Data, and I just became Tech Select this year, and so this is kind of all new. So kind of just creating a total understanding of where we're going to take this.
Great. Well, welcome to the Tech Select community.
My name is Gary Points with Polar Systems out in Portland, Oregon. Favorite college sport would be college football. A lot of Iowa people in here, so I'm a Hawkeye fan. Grew up there. I'm really looking to learn more about Microsoft Azure as well. We don't do anything with that today, so just looking to see what other lines of business we might be able to open up and solutions for our clients.
Thank you.
Ed Vanetti from QuadStar in Cleveland, Ohio. Favorite sport would be football. Just here to see what we can make some profit on, with the Microsoft server.
Thank you. Great.
Good morning. My name's Jim with Hyphenet. We're an Office 365 partner. Here to learn a little bit more about Azure. Favorite sport, football, and watching my son club soccer.
That's good. My name is Nick Souza. I'm with Marino Computer Concepts, and my favorite sport is hockey, San Jose Sharks, by the way. And I'm here to learn also about the Azure and see what we can do with our existing clients. So.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'm Chris Conley. I'm also with Marino Computer Concepts out of Northern California. But this is my hometown. I live in Las Vegas, so thanks for hosting it here. Favorite sport, being in Las Vegas, is people watching. It's a great place to people watch. And here to better understand what we can do with Azure and how it applies to our practice.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so definitely appreciate you taking the time. I didn't realize how much hockey fans were going to be in the room. It's usually football, football, football. I personally am a baseball fan. New York Yankees is my team. So, so you all definitely are in the right place, right? There's some key things that I heard, which was Microsoft Azure, right? Definitely want to learn about the opportunity around Azure. And then also, one of the areas that you mentioned was profitability, right? As you transition and transform your business model, you want to make sure it's done in a profitable fashion. So these are the two topics that we're going to be covering today, Microsoft Azure, as well as Office 365. So a little bit about the agenda today. I'm going to kick it off, giving you some information as it relates to what does the opportunity look like. You know, as Microsoft, we work with a lot of research companies out in the industry, so we have some really good data to share with you on the SMB space. And then JJ will come in about how do you get started with Microsoft Azure, right? How do you make money with Microsoft Azure? I kind of do the intro, and then JJ kind of brings it home, right? Then we're going to have, and we do this at Microsoft a lot, we do a lot of role playing, you know, as sales and technical professionals. So we're going to kind of share a little bit of that with you. We're going to have an Azure pitch off, right? So you'll have a few minutes to kind of get together and say, okay, this is what I've learned, and this is kind of what my elevator pitch would look like as it relates to Azure. And then accelerating your cloud practice, that's where Justin will come in and help you understand how do you create that demand and from a marketing perspective. Then we go into lunch. And as the morning and the day goes on, please take your breaks as needed. You don't need to raise your hand to go to the bathroom or anything. I'm okay. I won't get offended. Then after lunch, I'll come back, and then that's when we will transition to Office 365 in the afternoon, okay? But as you can see, majority of our time this entire morning will be spent on Microsoft Azure. We'll have an Office 365 pitch-off, and then lastly, Justin will come back and finish it off as it relates to how do you get the most out of your customers, and what are the tools and the support that Microsoft can offer for that. So definitely want to kick it off with what does the opportunity look like for you. This is definitely a deck. It's a partner-facing, it's a customer-facing deck. We will share it with you, you know, once we're done with the training today, that you can take it and share with your customers as well, too. Would be remiss if I didn't start with a quote on our mission statement. How many of you had a chance to get to WPC this summer? Good, good. So you probably had a chance to see Satya's keynote, right? And so this is where Satya shared his vision as where Microsoft was going as a company and what the future looks like for Microsoft. Basically, what we are trying to do and our goal is to really thrive as Microsoft and as Microsoft partners and customers in this entire IT ecosystem, right? His thought is to really look at the IT computing much differently, really look at it as a mobile-first, cloud-first world. I think that's something you had mentioned, right? It's like people are moving to the cloud, right? So come on board with us, right, as we move to the cloud. So one of the other things that, you know, at Microsoft, you know, as you meet with us and you talk to us throughout this week, you will see we're very passionate. We're very passionate about the work we do. You you wouldn't think we work for a technology company, but our goal as Microsoft is to really make the customer more productive, right? More productive so that they have more time, to spend with their families and the human interaction, right? So that's something that we're very passionate about. And as we talk about the different technologies and the products that we offer, that is our ultimate goal, right? Is to really affect customers around the world. There is going to be 3 billion users of devices out there. So if you have 3 billion users of devices, you can only imagine the amount of application development, right? The amount of data that's going to be produced. So we are definitely seeing a momentum into what Satya calls an explosion. There's going to be an explosion of spend in this IT industry. So you definitely are in the right place. We're very excited to be in this journey with you. So if many of you, I'm not sure I want to tell you how long I've been in this industry, right? But as you look at the slide, our first goal, right, in the IT industry was to make sure we had a desktop, right, on every, for every customer. And then we then evolved to the internet. With the internet, everyone was connected, right, to information. And that's when the whole networking started. And now we are in the evolution to the cloud, right? It is on-demand productivity, consumption-based modeling, and that's a little bit what you were talking about as it relates to, how does your business transform? It's definitely a transformation that's not only occurring in the customer space, but it's also going to occur in your businesses as well too, right? And then lastly is, how do you help get your customers, what we call, into the modern business, into the modern world? We definitely feel that it is going to be a hybrid environment. It's not going to be all or none, right? Not everything is going to go into the cloud. So definitely going to be a hybrid environment. The power of choice, the power of what you guys feel and what your customer feels is the right place for their line of business applications. As JJ and I were kind of prepping last night, I was kind of looking at this slide, and JJ's like, this is my favorite slide. And basically it's because the slide talks about the opportunity. We kind of share the growth that we at Microsoft have seen, right? But the most important thing is in the middle, right? The fact that in this ecosystem, for us to strive is we need partners like you, right? Is really about the partnership with all of you. And you can see if we look at Office 365, more than 3 of 4 installations of Office 365 are being deployed by partners today. Azure, 35% of our Azure revenue to date is coming through partners as well too. However, this year we expect to see a significant change with that. August 1st, we announced what we call Azure through Open, so Azure through Open licensing, and you can purchase it through Tech Data. So we definitely see an influx there. Our growth projections for Azure this year is going to be a 400% year-over-year growth on Azure, and our growth projections for Office 365 is going to be 100% growth. This slide here gives you some visibility as to how we are seeing our sales through Microsoft today, right? So you can see as we go from 2011 to 2015, how our on-premise business is very strong, right? The on-premise business is that line in the middle there, the dotted line in the middle, continues to be very strong. However, you can see the momentum that we're seeing in our cloud sales. And I think Joe was talked about, what are the cloud products that Microsoft offers today, right? It's those 4 that you see up there, right? Office 365, Microsoft Azure, CRM Online, and Windows Intune. And one of the things that I can share with you today is that CRM Online is also coming on Open, and that will be coming as well available to you. This slide here talks about, this is an analysis that we did with AMI Partners, a research firm, and they interviewed 750 partners, both small businesses or customers, small businesses as well as medium businesses. And there's two things that we definitely want to highlight here. The second one is cloud-based infrastructure, right? If you can see, cloud-based infrastructure, either if you're in a small business or a medium business, the potential, and the orange line is, the purple line is what they're doing today, and the orange line is what they're going to do tomorrow. So the fact is that small businesses and medium-sized businesses are ready to actually do storage, disaster recovery, everything within the cloud. And then the other one is virtualization, right? Is the opportunity to work with Microsoft Azure as it relates to virtualization. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is, kind of growing your practice with Microsoft. We see that, as we look at partners' buying patterns, right, we definitely see that partners are accustomed to one set of SKUs or one set of products, right? So the goal today is to have you kind of expand your breadth of Microsoft products, and that will then help grow your profitability as well, too. So as we talk about the opportunity, right, there's two things when we went out and researched with end customers, right? There's two things today, right now, that end customers are concerned about, right? And where they need your help as partners, right? And as resellers is cloud security. So 50%, close to 50% of customers that we surveyed, that was their number one concern, is cloud security. And then the second concern is disaster recovery, right? And how to have backup and transparency for their data as well, too. So as you're looking at your business and you're looking at what are some technology plans you need to be looking at, and what are things you need to use in your marketing material as you're talking to the partners, I would say those are the two key things that you want to highlight from a marketing perspective. So just as we've been talking about how the technology is changing for customers, it's also changing for you as well, too, right? Have you guys seen kind of a change in your business as well? Yep. Okay. So what we're seeing with some partners is we're definitely seeing a shift as it relates to partners becoming much more consultant. So that's a value add that you have to offer to your customers, is really being consultative and really understanding their business so that they're not buying technology from you, but instead what they're doing is they're buying, they're buying your expertise. Very good. They're buying your expertise. And then what they're also buying is you're solving a business problem for them, right? Before we were selling technology. Now what you're going to do is you're going to sell how you're buying, how you're solving a business problem for them. So as we look at what we call your path to success, these are the three things that you want to take a look at, is basically deliver solutions that are what your customers need, right? And then secondly is get to market quickly, right? Most of your salespeople, your system engineers or your managers, right, they know Microsoft products, right? So as you look at expanding the breadth of Microsoft products that you sell, it should be very quickly for them to get on board on new technology, right? So because they've been selling Windows Server, right, SQL, right? So if you want them to start working with Azure, it shouldn't take that much time for your staff to be ready and able to sell Azure as well, too. And then lastly is growing profitability from a profit perspective. We acknowledge that the products that we sell are going to give you X% of margin, right? It's the additional services that you offer as resellers, that's where a lot of the margin and the profitability is going to come from as well, too. We talked a little bit about, I think someone mentioned that, they're all going to go to the cloud. Our perspective is that they're not all going to go to the cloud, right? They're going to choose, right, which applications are going to stay on-prem, right? And you're going to help them choose and decide, and then which applications are going to go to the cloud. With the introduction of Microsoft Azure, right, you now have the ability to look at infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, right? So we're definitely expanding. You know, we started with Office 365 in the cloud, but as we move with Azure, we feel that there's a lot of momentum in the industry as well. And JJ will kind of go through, and he'll go through some pricing scenarios for you, et cetera, as it relates to Azure. Everyone familiar with Gartner? Right? You familiar with Gartner? So Microsoft is what, Microsoft currently is in what Gartner calls the Magic Quadrant. So Microsoft Azure is in the Magic Quadrant for Gartner. So basically what that's telling us is they feel we are on the right path as it relates to offering you the products and the technology, right, around infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. Does anyone know when Windows Server 2003 is going to go end of support? July 14th, 2015. And the question that I ask when I train the Tech Data salespeople, I'm like, so how many days is that from today, right? Anybody? JJ, where are we now, you think? I don't know the exact number, but it's probably about 260 something days from today, okay? Please look at this opportunity, not just that there's a product that's going to go end of support, right? This is really your chance to get out there and do an assessment of what is installed with your customers, right? And make some recommendations and consultative approach. So we feel that this is the time for you to have the conversation around Microsoft Azure, right? The fact that there's this opportunity, Microsoft is going to retire 2003, right? So this is a chance for you to consult with your customers to say, hey, should this line of business application, right, stay on a server, okay? Or should we look at Microsoft Azure, right? During this conference, you will see that as Microsoft, we have partnered very closely with Lenovo, right? And there's a reason we're doing this, right? We're doing it because we understand if you're purchasing Lenovo servers, right, on-prem, and then we also are talking about Microsoft Azure, okay? We have a solutions hub, we have our booth together, right? So we as Microsoft are really partnering, and Lenovo is an example because they are here. Oh, well now, the IBM servers, right? The x86? Gosh, see, how do I know about all this hardware? That I must, and I sit with the Lenovo team at Tech Data. So, yes, Joe.
A lot of my clients are concerned of, well, what happens if they come snooping around, looking for more info? How is my cloud vendor going to put up the fight?
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, that was actually a topic that apparently Microsoft has been addressing lately.
Yes,
And
at WPC we talked about it. Go
At
ahead.
WPC they talked about it, and they said that what they were trying to convey was that they were not going to turn over your data.
We're committed, right? You know, and we have, you know, teams and we have lobbyists, right? And it's not just Microsoft, right? Any cloud vendor, right, Joe, you know, is definitely committed to protect the data of our customers, absolutely.
This is a significant issue for small businesses, and, you know, I don't dispute that, Bob, that local, you know, your lawyer may not have, you know, capabilities that Microsoft doesn't have, but at 34,000 subpoenas in 6 months, I can't believe that humans are going to be actually answering all of those, right? So, you know, your lawyer gets involved when only you get subpoenaed. And that's the issue. It's when do they get subpoenaed, and do I have enough time to respond to these things? And so a lot of people are concerned about that issue.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
They know
absolutely.
that this is not on their property.
No, and we're definitely aware of that, which is, you know, as she was saying, you know, we definitely had a breakout session at WPC, right, talking about the same exact issue, right? So we're definitely committed, you know, to the security, right, of your information or of your customers' information. And You know, Microsoft is a leading vendor, right? A cloud leading vendor. You know, we're the first ones that are experiencing this, right? This is something new for a lot of people. So it's absolutely something that we know we have to own, right? And help you as partners, you know, to assure that we can do what we can in that type of situation. Yeah. So we talked about July 14th, 2015, right? There are 22 million instances of Windows Server 2003 worldwide running right now. Just even think about that, 22 million, right? This is definitely both a hardware refresh opportunity, right, as well as a services opportunity. And this is where the opportunity where you can attach Azure and look at Azure as well too. The other goal is, so of the 22 million, 8 million instances are running in the US, right? And I don't see the data point up here, but the other data point that we have is 67% of small and medium businesses are running Windows Server 2003. Would you guys agree to that as you look at your own business? You've been better about getting your customers up? Yeah. What about the rest of you? Do you feel most of your customers' information is on 2003? No? What are you guys running? What are they running? Okay, good. That's great.
How many people see a lot of 2003 servers still in your existing customer base? Okay. Because we've, I mean, I'm seeing a few other people sort of shake their head as well, and so we've been very aggressive just throughout the life cycle thing. So what we're curious about, at least from our, and we're an MSP, I don't know where other people sit in that mix, is since we've already got our own existing client base really already up in front and sort of been pushing a lot of Office 365 and other solutions, it's how do we go into, you know, sort of attack or add market share for the people that aren't in our customer base.
So what does end of support mean? There was 37 updates last year on Windows Server 2003. So as end of support happens, we're no longer doing, you know, updates as well too. The other thing is there will be customers that will be out of compliance, right? So if you look at the payment credit card industry, right? If they're running 2003, right, there is an opportunity that they will be viewed from Visa, MasterCard to definitely be out of compliance. And in other verticals, right, medical, right, HIPAA, all of that, so they definitely are out of compliance from that perspective. And then lastly, what we call at Microsoft is no safe haven, right? There's an opportunity for hackers, right, to come into their network, you know, et cetera. So these are some 3 business reasons, right? Not necessarily technical, but they're very valid business reasons as to why everyone needs to upgrade from 2003.
So how many of your customers take credit cards? All of them, right? If they're on Server 2003, they will not be able to take a credit card, flat out. So that, I mean, there's nothing better to go to a customer who wants to be able to accept money and say, hey, if you're running this, you're not going to be PCI compliant. We have to start the upgrade process now. That's one of the biggest selling points we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, there's some partners that say, why are we talking about this now? It's 260 plus days away, right? For a larger, medium-sized to enterprise customer, I mean, you all probably know better than I do, the migration takes approximately anywhere from 150 to 200 days, right? So this is not kind of the XP, right, like we saw last year. This is truly a much more complex, you know, migration that needs to take place from that perspective. Next, we will have JJ come up and talk to you a little bit about how you purchase Azure, right? The pricing on Azure, and then how to make money as it relates to Azure.
If you're moving your customers to, you know, hopefully to a newer version of Windows Server, you realize that there are a lot of benefits to doing that. You know, I could go over all the individual features that you're seeing on the screen here, but the key to Windows Server 2012 R2 is the fact that once you get your customers on that platform, you then have choices. Right? If you want to stay on premises, you can definitely do that. As Marissa said, we're not going to see Windows Server on premises sales go to 0, right? I mean, you're still going to be selling hardware, and And that is still a huge opportunity. And when you're thinking about selling hardware, you're thinking about virtualization. You're thinking about possibly, relocating to the cloud, and Microsoft Azure can help you do that. And specifically, Windows Server 2012 R2 was built for an Azure relocation, if that's something you want to do in the future. So when we take a look at this particular slide here, you see that what we're looking at for a lot of smaller businesses and medium-sized businesses is that they're going to probably work on a hybrid cloud type environment where they're going to have Microsoft Azure and Windows Server working side by side to extend their networks and move them into the cloud. Windows Server 2012 R2 is obviously going to be the platform that everything's going to be running on. Microsoft SQL Server as well as System Center are kind of the three infrastructure products that we think have a great play in the market today. So you're going to have cloud options on demand, reduce cost and complexity, and then also have that responsive response to business. So when we talk about moving Microsoft Azure beyond Windows Server, I like this statistic up here a lot. It says that 2 of every 5 Windows servers that are running 2003 also come with SQL 2005 and 2008. With Microsoft Azure, you have a choice as to what you want to do here. Obviously, you can install a window, you can install Azure in the cloud, and you can also take Windows SQL Server, or Microsoft SQL Server rather, into 2 different ways of deployment. You can run SQL Server inside of an Azure virtual machine, or you can run SQL as a platform. We'll talk about the differences between those two in just a second. You can also send some of your customers that are running Azure to Office 365, Office 365 customers into Azure using our Active Directory services in the cloud. Again, I'll talk about that in just a little bit. So with Microsoft Azure, a number of things that you can target: web hosting, IaaS, PaaS, and then DaaS, or desktop as a service. Can someone tell me what type of solutions you guys are doing today inside of the cloud? Are you guys doing any IaaS today? Yes? No? Anyone actually running any type of Microsoft Azure VM right now? Okay. So, okay, internally they're using it. Anyone doing any platform as a service in the cloud today? All right. What about desktop as a service? What's your desktop as a service deployment right now? What are you guys using? RDS and SPA licensing. And what are you using as your, are you actually the hoster yourself, or are you on Azure or a different provider? Okay, all right, great. So when you think about Microsoft Azure, I think you need to think about, okay, where do we want to take our specific customers? Are we going to target all their entire infrastructure, or do we want to look at these things piece by piece? And so when I look at this particular slide, you can say, well, you know what, we've got a great Active Directory running on premises. All the machines are tied directly to there, but we're running into a storage issue, or we want to be able to get access to our files wherever they're located. A number of different ways to do it, but you can make Azure a file server location. Different ways to do that within a VM. We can also use blob storage. We can also use backup when you talk about just overall file redundancy in that regard. Anyone doing any web serving right now? I know that used to be something that you used to make a lot of money on, but now you've pushed it off onto third parties. Microsoft Azure is a great web hosting platform. In fact, Sochi2014.com, millions and millions of simultaneous users on that website, all powered by the platform of Microsoft Azure. If you're thinking about, well, I've got this whole, cloud idea going on, and I'd like to make sure that my users are able to get authenticated not only to what they're doing on premises, but also, with all the other cloud services that they're linking into. What's going to be that unifying platform to tie all of those simultaneous logons into? Microsoft Azure Active Directory can do that. And kind of going on to the desktop as a services type play, we also think about terminal services in the cloud. How many of you guys do terminal services today? All right, so I see more and more hands right there. Right now when you do a terminal server, you install a Windows server on premises, or you put it in some type of colo, and then you have people attached to those servers, right? Microsoft Azure supports terminal services in the cloud. And finally, when you're talking about upgrading your brand new server and moving it, whether it wants to be on premises or in the cloud, you can do an application server as well inside of a VM. When you think about targeting and migrating applications, you can migrate as is, You can, find alternatives. So if there's a different software as a service type application, instead of migrating it, into a VM, you can go that route. You can repair, rewrite, or refactor your application. So there are different shims and things like that that you can work on and virtualize. And obviously, if the application itself can be upgraded, Microsoft Azure can help you do that. So when you think about the migration process steps, we've actually put a lot of work into a few tools in order to help you do this. And we really look at the migration process as a four-prong approach. Discovering, first cataloging and discovering the software and workloads that you want to do and upgrade inside of Microsoft Azure or even Windows Server on premises. Then you're going to want to assess and categorize those applications and workloads. And then finally target where your destinations are going to be. Are you going to keep them on premise? Or are you going to go into the cloud? Then when you do the final migration, we can help you through that as well. So when you look at all these different types of steps, discover, assess, target, we look at these all as opportunities to build this destination as Microsoft partners. A couple of great resources to help you. There's some great Windows Server 2003 end of support or end of service resources, and we've also got a planning assistant. So I just wanted to go over this right here as a way for you to think about the end of support for 2003. But really, I know a lot of you are here to learn about Microsoft Azure, and that's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time right now. So the SMB services growth is pretty huge, right? Moritz has already talked about it. SMB server virtualization 2015, we're looking at a $2.5 billion market. Remote employees are increasing and increasing year over year over year. And mid-market customers feel that it behooves them to use services of a local provider. Microsoft Azure, with you guys, really helps to enable that. So when you take a look at Microsoft Azure, what this is an application platform. There's so many different things that you can do with Microsoft Azure, and I think that a lot of our sales folks and technical folks, they say, well, what does it do? What can we do with Microsoft Azure? And they liken it to baking a cake. When you bake a cake, you've got multiple ingredients that you can use to create a vanilla cake, a chocolate cake, a strawberry cake. You can customize it with icing or little decorations, and that's kind of what the Microsoft Azure platform is all about. You can build applications using any language, tool, or framework. It integrates into many public cloud solutions. We've got a 99.95% monthly SLA, and if you are using Microsoft Azure as a platform, we have automatic OS and service patching. This slide right here, it's kind of indicative of why there's a lot of confusion about Microsoft Azure. You see all these app services up here, from caching, identity, content delivery network. You've got compute here with virtual machines, websites. You've got storage with SQL, blob storage. You've got connecting networks. There's so many different things that you can do with Microsoft Azure, but we really wanted to kind of boil it down. So first of all, let's talk about what infrastructure as a service is with Microsoft Azure. On the left-hand side, you see this green section, which talks about customer partner managed solutions. And then you see the orange section, which actually is what is hosted on Microsoft Azure. So when you think about moving your infrastructure into the cloud with Microsoft Azure, this is what's going to happen. Microsoft is going to control the physical servers, the physical storage, the physical networking, and the virtualization layer inside of the cloud. You, as Microsoft partners, are going to help your customers with everything else. The operating system, the middleware applications and runtime. So what this means is that when you take a virtual machine and put it on Microsoft Azure, you own that virtual machine. You've got to take care of all the operating system updates, all the patches, all the configurations and updates. That's your operating system in the cloud, so you've got full control. That's a good thing and a bad thing. Because it's a good thing for you, where you can say, well, you know what? I don't want this particular hotfix to hit the server. I want to configure this operating system exactly the way that I want it to be configured, right? So this is full customization. This is where a lot of our partners are taking their customers today. Because they're saying, well, you know what? I've heard about these platforms. I know I could go Office 365. I know I can use a specific software as a service in the cloud. But there's this one little component. There's this one little setting that's not enabled in a pure software as a service environment. I want to have that full control. That's why they go IaaS. Any questions on this?
Performance of the Azure servers for something I just wanted to test out, something simple versus a virtualized environment I have in my own premise.
Okay.
The performance is awful. And
What-
I have the highest bandwidth from Comcast and the highest bandwidth from FiOS working on it. So my biggest concern was local performance for the client when we've been giving them quad servers, quad CPU servers, and SAS drives and 15K SAS drive, and now moving up to SSDs. They're taking a step backwards by moving to the cloud where the performance is really hit. And so I'm just, that's a big concern of mine,
Yeah.
of how do I move them there and get the same level of performance that I want that they would normally get on their systems.
Right. So in this case right here, it sounds like Joe has an experience where his particular testing of Microsoft Azure didn't give him the performance that he was seeing on premises. And again, I don't know what workloads you're running. I don't exactly know what type of application was going in the cloud. But again, from a scalability standpoint and from a performance standpoint, it's all in the configuration. And this is the biggest thing that partners are going to have to learn and go through. Because I don't know what size VM you used. I'm not sure exactly if you used a small VM versus a large VM. What type of performance is in there. What type of redundancy you had, or what type of. So I can't really answer that question. However, the reports are out there again that, like I said, Associate2014.com, to be able to perform and have the types of things that were going behind the scenes running on a platform in the cloud to have that much activity, obviously huge. Virtual machines are really used, in this case, as an infrastructure as a service type replacement. So if I've got a custom application, again, that I want to have people terminal server into and they get a desktop looking at that application inside of a VM, it's basically a remote desktop session. So, everything running on that server is going to be running in that server. Again, in that case right there, you would have to think about the size of the VM in terms of the performance that you want to get out of it. So, okay, well, moving on, we do want to talk about the fact that this, we believe, is where the industry is going to head, and that is platform as a service. You'll notice here that in this case, we have now moved the operating system into Microsoft Azure. Microsoft now takes care of everything you see over here, and we are just issuing out, or basically just pushing out a portal into using Microsoft as a platform. A perfect example of this would be SQL Server. SQL Server used as a platform is now no longer something you've got to patch or control or configure. You have your SQL database in the cloud, you point your application to that SQL Server, and there you go. You don't have to worry about updating that SQL service anymore. We like to think about Microsoft Azure in different cloud computing patterns and scenarios. This is a great slide that we use to talk to customers about Microsoft Azure, especially customers that are not sure about what they want to do on premises. Take a look at these different types of ways to compute in the cloud. First of all, there's on and off. So when you think about an on and off type workload, there are going to be times where you have inactivity. So I like to think about this as maybe there's a report that you're running that you have to run on the second Friday of every single month, but it takes 5 servers to do that. They're only running on that second Friday of the month. The rest of the month, you don't really need them, but you've already paid for that hardware, right? In this case right here, with on and off, you just spin them up in Azure as you need to run that report, and then turn them off when you're done running that report. If they're growing fast, they don't know how many servers that they need for 5, 6 months from now. And they don't want to overbuy because they may not need those servers 4 or 5 months from now. With Microsoft Azure, you scale up as you need them. When you talk about unpredictable demand and predictable bursting, you're going to have ebbs and flows in a business. Sometimes the servers are being used heavily, sometimes they're not. Think back to school season, Christmas, specific holidays. With Microsoft Azure, you can scale when you need them and turn them on and turn them off. So what we wanted to do was kind of break down, because like I said, chocolate cake, vanilla cake, so many different things you can do with Microsoft Azure. How do we think about the Azure services being delivered by partners in the SMB space? Where do we think that you guys are going to be doing a lot of your business with Microsoft Azure? First of all, what we've been discussing here is on-demand virtual machines, deploying applications directly into Microsoft Azure, extending your networks. If I'm a small business and maybe I can only afford, one physical piece of hardware for my Active Directory on premises, but I do want to extend that Active Directory into the cloud, Microsoft Azure can be that second domain controller in the cloud, right? If you're thinking about developing or testing applications, You know, instead of buying a second test server to do that, just test it in Microsoft Azure. If you only need to run it for 30 days, upload your application into Microsoft Azure for 30 days, see if it works, decommission that server when you're done, because it does work, and then install it locally on premises. So test servers are a thing of the past when you think about Microsoft Azure. We've already talked about websites, you know, ready for business, huge scale, Sochi2014.com. You know, again, we're very proud of our platform. When you're streaming videos, when you're delivering content, when you're serving up, you know, that redundancy that you'd like to have in a web server, Azure can definitely help your customers in that regard. With data backup and disaster recovery, this is a very exciting area for us, and the one that we're really developing very, very quickly here. You know, if I have a situation where, you know, I've got this one site, and I need that high availability, or I need that redundancy in case there's a disaster, I want to have another site that is replicating the data that's happening inside of that primary site. We just acquired a company called InMage, which will allow you to have that automatic site recovery in the cloud. And we're really excited about that because it'll not only allow you to have that type of recovery option with Hyper-V, but also with other platforms as well. So if you're looking at a place to put your stuff, put in Azure regardless of the hypervisor that you're on. Finally, identity and access management, I think, is a great way to tie everything together with the cloud. First of all, if you're thinking about Office 365 and you're thinking about Active Directory Federation services, you want to be able to, you know, to take that bridge from your actual Active Directory into Office 365, and you're thinking, well, with Active Directory Federation services, I've got to install a brand new server to run ADFS. Run ADFS inside of a virtual machine inside of Azure. We've also got identity and access management, as I mentioned, with Active Directory in the cloud. How many of you here, and I didn't actually get that many hands in the Cloud Summit, but how many of you here have customers that have more than one online service that their users are using? So maybe Office 365 plus some other service, CRM Online, yeah. Hopefully you have, yeah, that's the thing. Now, if you have multiple services and they're not all Microsoft services, Salesforce.com, for example, Google Apps or whatever, you know, you're going to find that you now have multiple portals that you've got to manage those usernames and passwords from. With Azure Active Directory, you can create a single sign-on experience so that you don't have to worry about all those separate portals. If a user leaves the company, you just disconnect their Azure Active Directory account, and then it disconnects them from everything else. Now, Azure Active Directory is not the same thing as extending your Active Directory. It's kind of a different directory service in the cloud, but it is a great way to get started because Azure Active Directory, at its base form, costs $0. It's a way for you to make instant margin, setting up that Azure Active Directory, showing customers how it works, getting them excited about it, and then upselling them on some of the more premium features.
I just always felt that was the missing ingredient with Azure, that, you know, I'd rather put AD in the cloud for all my small businesses and have a read-only domain controller on site, and without doing federation services and other things. And I'm assuming that's possible today.
It is possible, but not the way that I'm talking about with the single sign-on experience across multiple types of applications.
Yeah, and that's even less important, just the idea that, you know, you think about your ability to protect certain resources and stuff, and with Office 365 in the cloud, to me, and I think this is happening now, is just turning that around and saying, I want my AD in the cloud, and have a read-only domain controller on site with file server so I can get to the files quick enough, that type of thing. So it is doable today.
It is doable today. So there's Active Directory within a virtual machine, so you can extend.
Just create and run your own virtual machine.
Create your own virtual machine. You can have Azure. You can have Active Directory running in the cloud, right on that. What I'm talking about specifically is a special service called Azure Active Directory, but it is not the exact same thing as having that virtual machine running Active Directory. We can get into more.
No, that makes sense. So it's just the fact that my AD really could be in the cloud, but that local file server could be, again, all the authentication to that and my PCs. But are my PCs joined to that AD domain, or
Possibly.
that's a different deal?
So I mean, so if you have your virtual machine running Windows Server 2012 R2 in the cloud, running Active Directory right there, you'd have to set up a site-to-site VPN between your local premises and then in the cloud, and then in that case right there, it would work that way.
Okay. Well.
Yep. Some more examples of partner offerings on Microsoft Azure. People are doing remote desktop sessions directly to an Azure VM. This is an exciting way to have those applications be running in the cloud. Dynamics GP is fully supported in an Azure VM. People are saying, well, I can do SharePoint inside of Office 365, but I want to create a very customized SharePoint site. How can I do that? Microsoft Azure can do that for them in the cloud. We talked about ADFS running in a VM instead of having to do it on premises if you want to do federation, for example, to Office 365. There's DirSync, domain controller extension, Azure backup, third-party backup to Azure Blob Storage, and then things like Azure Active Directory for those multiple single sign-on solutions. So why exactly would you want to select Microsoft? I know that you've got your choice of other vendors, not only from a hypervisor standpoint, but also in the cloud. These are some of the reasons why we've seen partners be successful selling the Microsoft solution. We are the single vendor across clouds and the single point for infrastructure, OS, and applications. So when you think about Windows Server 2012 R2, who developed that particular operating system? Microsoft. And when we delivered and created that particular operating system, we designed it with Azure in mind. So Azure is a first-class citizen when it comes to that operating system. Tenured experience and enterprise credibility. Obviously, we've been running in the cloud for a very, very long time. Maybe when you don't think about Office 365 or Azure specifically, but then start thinking about a lot of our web services as well as our email solutions. From a consumer space, Microsoft has been in this game for a very long time. We're the trusted operating system when it comes to supporting small businesses and enterprises of all sizes. Single vendor for infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. As I mentioned, I think right now, when you look at some of the other vendors out there, you're thinking infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. And again, that's where we think there's a huge opportunity. But there's going to be a turning point. Maybe not next year, maybe not even for a couple of years. But as I mentioned, you're going to see customers move from infrastructure as a service into platform as a service, where they don't have to worry about that operating system. When that happens right there, you don't want to do a migration from another vendor into Azure, which is probably going to be what you're going to want to do, right? Stay on Microsoft Azure from day one so that transition is seamless. As I mentioned, not only does Windows Server run best on Microsoft Azure, but if you want to run SQL inside of a VM, if you want to run SharePoint inside of a VM, the best place to do it is Microsoft Azure, where it's fully supported. So an example of that would be, hey, you know what, my application, SQL or SharePoint, or hey, my Windows Server is not running properly inside of this third-party infrastructure as a solution type scenario. The first thing that you're going to be asked is, does it work on premises? Does it work inside of Microsoft Azure? Because if that's the case, then it's a platform issue on that third-party side. We offer you that full support. So how exactly do you buy and make money with Microsoft Azure? We've got 3 tools to kind of help you decide how much you're going to invest in Microsoft Azure. And the first way is just the basic Microsoft Azure pricing calculator. If you go to MicrosoftAzure.com, you'll be able to see that there's an online calculator that's going to help you figure out how much it's going to cost. Let me see if I can actually get there right now. All right, so this is the basic calculator. If you know exactly what you're going to be purchasing, you'd be able to go to this calculator and see what I just kind of showed you on that slide. We kind of break it up into a different set of sections, from virtual machines, mobile services, cloud services, data management, and the full calculator, where everything's kind of on the same page. In regards to what we might want to do, for example, we might take a look at virtual machines. When I look at virtual machines, I see that there are a number of settings that I can select here. They've called they're labeled, and these will change from time to time as we add more functionality. But D series, A series, and you can see the basics of what's going on here. This is a single core, 3.5 gigs worth of RAM, 10 gigabyte SSD running in the cloud. If I then select, sorry, it's hard for me to see here. If I say, okay, I want 3 of those, the cost would be 39 cents per hour, or $290 per month, running 24/7. This is a Windows virtual machine that includes the server licensing and the CAL access to that Windows server. So you don't have to buy on-premises CALs in order to access those Windows servers. It's a pretty great deal. Unlimited access. Now, there are some other considerations you've got to think about. We also do third-party operating systems like Linux. If you want to do SQL Server as well and BizTalk Server, there are separate VMs that have those already integrated into them. But you're also going to have to think about what the bandwidth is going to be like. If you want bandwidth, if you've got a lot of information that's going to be leaving Microsoft Azure, this is a heavy consideration, but it's fairly inexpensive. We do not charge for any data going into Microsoft Azure, but we charge for all data coming out of Microsoft Azure. And so if we're just doing basic Active Directory authentication, you're not going to be using that much bandwidth. But if you're trying to push out videos or push out large files, you're going to see that the cost could go up if you're doing it inside of a VM. So bandwidth support, let's go ahead and say that we want to have 1 terabyte worth of data leaving the cloud every single month. You're looking at about $120 per. Take that off. Yeah, worst case. So if I've got 2 terabytes leaving, you're looking at about $240 a month out of Azure. I don't have them right here. I can't remember where let me see if it's under cloud services here. Give me 1 second here. Okay, yeah, I don't have it on this particular calculator. But you get the point in terms of what I'm looking at. So let me go back over here to virtual machines and go back to this scenario again where. So those machines seem like pretty brain-dead machines. Okay. Yeah, let's look at some of these things. Let's look at, okay, so if I want a quad core, 20 gigs worth of RAM, 100 gigabyte SSD, this is going to be 60 cents per hour, $446 per month if I'm running 24/7. But again, given that example, given this example right here of a solution where I need all that processing power to run my report every second Friday, and that report, let's say, with that type of configuration, would complete in 10 hours, let's say, right? That would only be $6 a month for that server. That's all that I would have to pay for that specific scenario. In between then, can you sort of like hibernate it? You can. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you completely hibernate it and decommission it, it will lose its IP at that point right there. So basically, the difference between hibernation and kind of putting it to sleep depends on how you're going to be utilizing that particular that scenario. Right, right. So this is a great way for you to kind of visualize and how this might look. We've got some other ways to help you calculate as well if you're just getting started. So Microsoft, let me show you right here, created what we call the Microsoft Azure Open Calculator tool. And this is now an Excel spreadsheet that will kind of ask you a couple of questions and help you output a possible solution. I'll show you that in just a second. We've also created the Microsoft Azure IaaS Cost Estimator tool. If you're working in a solution where you've got multiple servers, this is a larger install, we're not just talking just a small business server replacement, and you want to kind of get a sense of how this is really going to play out in Microsoft Azure, this cost estimator tool is something you download directly onto a domain controller or a server running inside of that physical infrastructure. You run it for a few minutes, run it during peak hours, and it'll output kind of what it is seeing across your network and advise you as to what it's going to look like inside of Microsoft Azure. This is a free tool to download. Again, you're going to get the deck, so when you click on that link from the deck, you'll be able to access the tool. So what it does right there is it connects to support environments, not only Hyper-V, but also ESXi. So if you are running this inside of a VMware environment, you're still going to be able to run the tool. It collects the data like the processor, memory, hard disk bandwidth, and kind of gives you the optimum equivalent inside of Azure. Gives you the kind of the what you're going to need to purchase, and you should be good to go there. So let me show you this this tool right here, this Open Calculator tool. If for those of you that are just getting started, this is a free tool. Again, you can download it directly from the partner site. The link will be inside of the deck. But in this case right here, you say, okay, well, I want to buy Microsoft in open licensing, and we'll talk about how open licensing works in just a second. But in this case right here, you say, what region will you be located in? US East. What currency will you be using? Let's just say we're going to be using the US dollar there. We've got multiple currencies if you are going into some other countries. But we're going to say that we want to use this for about 5 months. How would you like to estimate the pricing for backup for this scenario? If we want to do separate type of backup solution, we'll go ahead and say, yes, we want to estimate the pricing there. And would you like to estimate the pricing for deploying apps within VMs for this scenario? I'll go ahead and say yes to that. Are you going to use this in a virtual machine in production or development and testing? Let's go ahead and say production. Do you want this workload to include SQL? In this case, we'll just do pure VMs and say no to that. What operating system would you like to use? We'll go ahead and select Windows, and then press this button to see your customized scenario. So what this does is it kind of gives you a spreadsheet that you can start working on to figure out exactly what kind of VMs you want to use. So in this case right here, let's say we want to do a medium instance, and we're going to do, let's say we want to do 2 of those. And let's see here, let's go ahead and say that we want to do some storage here, and outbound transfer is going to be, let's say it's going to be outbound transfer, let's say 1,000 gigabytes. You can see the estimated monthly price for this particular scenario would be about $360, and the estimated price for 5 months of service would be $1,800. And the reason why it's important for you guys to know the estimated price for the number of months extending is because the way the Microsoft Azure through Open program works depends on you being able to kind of forecast what's going to happen across the number of months that you want to buy. All right, so this is, let's go ahead and walk through this example right here. This would be a proposed Microsoft Azure solution. In this case, you've got a web application server. It requires AD. It's running on aging hardware, and the customer desires a highly available platform for the application server. So our Microsoft proposed Azure solution would be something that looks like this. They need two application servers. They need 2 domain controllers, so you see the monthly cost there. They want to set up this scenario so that it works inside of an on-premises hooked up to Microsoft Azure solution, which requires a site-to-site VPN. This right here is a fixed cost of $1.20 per day. Disk storage, they want to use 400 gigs worth right there. They want to do some independent backup as well inside of Microsoft Azure, and their estimated egress traffic is going to be equivalent to about $20. The total monthly cost here would be about $550 for that particular solution. So this right here, maybe that application server or those domain controllers right there are going to be sufficient for what you're looking for. Some smaller businesses that may not have a huge requirement for the applications because maybe they're doing Office 365, maybe you're able to completely remove that monthly cost right there because they don't really have any applications that they're running. They just want Active Directory in the cloud, right? So this right here would be kind of how you would make money, or where the money comes in for Microsoft Azure. So the Azure consumption charges from the previous page you saw were about $550. Now, when you buy Microsoft Azure through Open, there's an approximate margin of about 20%. This comes from the amount that you're going to be receiving directly as a margin from Tech Data, as well as some of the incentives that we're going to talk about at the end of the day too from Microsoft. So we're seeing actually that the 20% currently is on the low side. We're seeing, in some cases, 25, 30% margin on Microsoft Azure depending on the promos that you're using in place. Managed services that you're going to charge, you've got to remember, even though the server is located inside of Microsoft Azure, you still need to sell this as a managed server. You still need to make sure that your customers realize that I am still completely controlling the operating system in terms of making sure that that operating system has the latest patches, it's always up to date. I'm making sure that your applications are always running for you. So you still charge the managed services fee. In this case right here, each server is being charged $150 per. Your services margin, hopefully between 20 to 50% on that. And the total estimated cost to your customer is going to be $1,150 on an estimated basis. So this is the ongoing monthly estimated cost. But you know what? We still need to set this up. Sure, you don't have to set up a physical server, but there is still a lot of migration, deployment that needs to happen within an in the cloud service. I still have to install or upload the application, configure it, create all the users, patch that server up. This is an example, again, of a customer quote where fixed cost was about $5,000 to do that deployment at $125 per hour, or for an estimated 40 hours. Your total upfront cost to this customer would be $5,000. And that's how that would kind of play out. Any questions on this? All right? So just a quick recap. We've got the Azure pricing calculator. This is the website directly on azure.microsoft.com. We've got the cost estimator tool that you can download and actually run on the server. And then we've got the Azure and Open Calculator, which is an Excel spreadsheet for folks that are just starting out. It can kind of, ask you a couple of questions and determine what you're going to need. So what's the partner transaction model look like? How do you actually purchase Microsoft Azure today? So here are Microsoft Partner Azure licensing options. And some of these have been around for a while. Right? And some of you may have already done some of these things. But we believe that the open way is going to give you the biggest benefit from a financial standpoint. So first of all, you could go directly to azure.com or azure.microsoft.com and use the Microsoft Online Services portal and purchase it directly there. At that point right there, you are paying the price that you see in the calculator. There are no discounts when you go directly to that Microsoft Online Services portal. Some of the pros to that are that you're able to see how much it costs. You're able to estimate it using the calculator. You're good to go, and it is truly based on the actual consumption of what happens that particular month. And this will become more clear once I get to the open model. All right. So it's a great way. It's a great way for you to get started. You just turn it on, turn it off. You're good to go. No real commitment after paying for that particular month. Right. If you are a larger customer, or if you have a larger customer, or if you are a larger partner, there have been ways in the past to sign an agreement where you agree upfront to pay to consume at least $25K of Microsoft Azure per year. There were no overarch penalties. There's a special enterprise portal that you'd be able to go to, but the incentives there have definitely not been as rich as in the past. So if you were at the base level, you're only looking at about a 3% margin on an enterprise agreement. If you're selling tons and tons and tons, maybe you get that 12%. Now, each of these models right here, if you were going to be selling these as a Microsoft partner, you wouldn't be able to just sell them directly to the customer and have them do what they needed to do. You would actually have to provide some service if you wanted to quote-unquote resell Microsoft Azure, which would mean you have to be the one that configures the operating system. You're the one that's going to need to do all the patches and updates. You're the one that's going to offer the managed services. And that's what a lot of you are doing today, so that probably doesn't mean anything at all. But I did want to make mention of the fact that with the open program, you can basically just resell Microsoft Azure. If you have a customer that's already on Microsoft Azure today, this is a perfect way to try to get them started. If they know, for example, I use $1,000 worth of Microsoft Azure, and they're paying the retail price of $1,000 of Microsoft Azure per month, you can resell it directly to them, sell them, you say, look, I'll give it to you for, X amount of dollars, and you immediately get the margin directly from Tech Data. Does that kind of make sense? Question back there.
We've already started looking at this, not so much on the Azure side, but the Office 365 side.
Okay.
Because we work primarily with government.
Okay.
And up to now, Microsoft has not been willing to pay us at all for selling Office 365.
Okay.
So that's why we sell Google. Just kidding. But anyway, although it has been discussed, one of the problems we're having is, okay, you've announced open licensing. We've looked at the open licensing. We even found a SKU number for Office 365 for open licensing for government.
Okay, yep.
No one within Microsoft can tell you how to roll those customers over without turning their account off completely for 30 days and starting a new one.
Well, go ahead.
The only person that we did, matter of fact, I just got the email this morning, and I looked at it, and it was the direct government customer rep for the customer that said she might be able to help us.
Okay.
So if we're having that kind of a problem for a product that's already been released for a number of months, you're trying to tell me that no one has tried to roll this over? You're saying that you can do it with Azure. I'm having trouble believing that you can when you can't do it with a couple mailboxes.
The Azure platform and the Office 365 platform are completely different beasts. So I mean, the billing portal and the management portal inside of inside of Azure is completely a different.
No,
Office
but this has
365.
got nothing to do with whether you can roll it over the environment or not. It has to do with stopping the billing with the customer and turning it into an open licensing.
Right.
It's got nothing to do with the physical. It's got nothing to do with licensing. It's got nothing to do with the other stuff. It has to do with being able to put a access key into a field that doesn't exist?
Well, okay, I'll say this. I work in the commercial space, so I can't speak specifically about the government SKU. But if it's the same way as commercial open, in the case of if you want to transition a customer that's currently on a direct model or on the advisor model, what would need to happen is that you would have to purchase the open key, okay, which you probably sounds like you've done. And have you gone to Office365.com, office.com/setup365?
We go into that, and there is no methodology in order to make the transition.
That's correct. There is no methodology within the portal when you log into it. So what I'm trying to get at here is this is what would need to happen. You would have to tell your technicians to go to office.com/setup365. At that point right there, they would be able to put in an open key. That open key would be then inserted into the existing environment. Once it's inside the existing environment, they would then have to go into each user account and reassign them the license from the direct model into the open model. So again, I can't say that's how it works for the government SKUs for sure, but I'm fairly confident that if you bought it through open, it's going to work the same way. Okay. So there should be a way to do that. All right, so when it comes to Microsoft Azure through Open, we're really excited about this. We launched this on August 1st. A lot of partners who have been working on these earlier models right here, they've been looking at this and going, wow, you know what? This is a great way for me to make money off of the actual Azure sale. Because a lot of partners were saying, well, you know what? I'll just sell them the Microsoft Azure. What Microsoft charges them is what Microsoft charges them. But, I'm only going to make money on my managed services. Open allows you to make money both ways. Okay? Now, how does Microsoft Azure and Open actually work? Microsoft Azure and Open is a monetary commitment that's valid for 12 months. It's applicable to any Azure service. So you don't have to think, okay, I want to do virtual machines, I want to do backup, I want to do this, I want to do that. You don't have to break it up with Microsoft Azure and Open. What we sell is one individual SKU, one TD part number, and there it is right there, 11485041, that has the equivalence of $100. If I want to buy $500 worth of Microsoft Azure, I just order from TD 5 of those part numbers, and I get $500 worth of credit towards Microsoft Azure. Now that's 500 full retail value of that SKU. You, of course, will be purchasing at the margin that Tech Data is giving to you, as well as taking advantage of all the Microsoft discounts, which means that you may have purchased that $100 SKU at the end of the day for only about $70, but you're able to provide that value to your customers for $100. Does that make sense? Now, the reason why I'm saying this gets a little bit tricky is because you need to buy this up front and then add it to the Azure portal. If you haven't been able to determine what the run rate is or how much you're going to have to purchase per month, that's the rub. That's the kind of the trade-off between going direct and going the open model. So the way that we look at this, and again, it's a 12-month commitment. So let's say, remember that previous example? Let's just say it costs $100 per month. Or that's how much we think it's going to cost. And you sell it directly to the customer. The customer is going to activate whatever services, and let's say that month they only use $50 worth of services. Now you've got $50 that you can carry over to the next month. So the next month, you can sell them more, or you can say, look, we were able to minimize your costs on the Azure front, and so we don't have to buy another SKU that month. What we're saying though is that because you're not going to know exactly how much the customer is going to purchase or need every single month, build some buffer in there. Buy 3 to 6 months worth of what you believe the Azure cost is going to be, and then see what the run rate is month after month after month. And then if you need to add some more or decrease the amount that they're going to have to pay per month, that could be a bonus to both you and the customer. And so right now, the way that Azure and Open works is that it is a business process that follows existing online services in Open. And what does that mean? When you purchase an agreement in Open today, the agreement is between Microsoft and the end customer. Okay? I'm going to give you some good news here in just a second, but it is between Microsoft and the end customer. However, Microsoft, when it came to create the Microsoft Azure and Open SKU, said, you know what? We want to make sure that because partners are the people that are selling open agreements, we can make the partner the end customer. So you, as Microsoft partners, can buy Microsoft Azure tokens and sign an agreement directly through Tech Data, and you guys can be the end partner. And then you can create subtenants within your subscription, and then and configure it that way. Does that make sense? So this is kind of what we have right here. So in the model I said, if you already have a customer that's already doing Azure, they know how to purchase Azure, they just want to be able to purchase it from you, and you guys can make the margin, pure resell you're able to do inside of the open program. You cannot do pure resell inside of the direct model. So I can't go, so let's say you look at the calculator and go, oh, it looks like it's $500 a month on the calculator. I'm going to go direct, I'm going to try to sell it to someone for $600. I mean, they'd probably be pretty stupid because they could go buy it on their own, right? But you're not allowed to do that inside of the direct model. You can't do that inside the EA model either because you have to provide a service. Pure resale is one of the great benefits of Office 365. So in the case where, for example, if your customer, you've set them up and you decide to part ways, but you still want to make money on them, sell them open. Partially managed services is where you are going to be partially managing the customer's environment. And in this case right here, what you could do is you could sell individual agreements to every single one of your customers. So if I've got 10 customers, there are going to be 10 agreements that are going to be sold to them. I sell them individual Azure tokens for each one of those agreements. They make you an admin of that infrastructure, and then you have to have they give you admin access so that you can manage that. And the full managed service is what I mentioned. When you are listed as the Microsoft partner, you are the master tenant, and then you create subtenants underneath those. Okay? Model 1 is what I just talked about, the partially managed services, where each customer has their own agreement. They just make the partner the co-admin. So with Office 365, you might have heard at WPC that we mentioned that there is something called the CSP program. And with the CSP program, the Cloud Solution Provider program, you're going to see that there are distributors that are going to be available that will be able to help you sell Microsoft Azure in terms of this tiered model. It doesn't look exactly like this right here, but it is something that's going to be coming in the near future. All right, so what do managing renewals look like with Microsoft Azure? So in this case right here, I've got a use case of 100 gigabytes worth of Azure. And in this case right here, the customer decides that they're going to purchase $400 up front. You're going to see that when the balance threshold gets to a certain point, you can set up your own balance alerts. You can be notified that, hey, you need to purchase more Microsoft Azure. So, for example, if I set up 6 months worth of Microsoft Azure, I think it's going to cost me $100 a month, so I buy $600 up front. In this case, they said $400 a month. They can say that I want to have an alert once it gets to a balance of $120, so that notifies me to purchase more Azure credits. What will then happen is that it'll use up the balance of that $120, and then it'll convert it back over, and then it'll start using this new SKU that you just purchased. If, for example, you get to the balance of $120 here, and then you stop using Microsoft Azure for whatever reason, you never use it, or you don't complete using that $120 before the end of the 12 months, you lose it. Okay? So that's why over-purchasing is something you don't want to do either. And that's why we're not saying purchase the whole year up front, purchase 6 months. That'll give you kind of the monthly run rate, and then you can buy some more after that. You could, I mean, if you want to get a new agreement every single month and just do this pure monthly, you can do that as well. But from a logistics standpoint and from an operational standpoint within your business, if you've got hopefully tens and hopefully hundreds of customers in the distant future, you don't want to deal with that. But there are some solutions that are coming from Microsoft that may help that out. So anatomy of a Microsoft deal. Here's a scenario where we have a single box web server. There's an Active Directory file server and a vertical app, and they've also got a single box SQL server. So these are kind of three solutions. You can actually break them up if you wanted to, that you can think about in a Microsoft Azure deal. So what are some of the ways that you're going to make money here? And I've got some breakouts for, again, I know you guys want to see kind of the on-premises versus cloud solution here. But an enemy of Microsoft Azure deal is going to be looking like something like this. Margin incentives that you're going to receive directly from Microsoft, not only the front-end margin you get directly from Tech Data, but some of the channel incentives that are in place right now, 20+%. You're going to get the deployment configuration that we just talked about earlier in that one slide that I showed you where you had that 40 hours of deployment. And then you've got the managed services that are going to happen every single month. This kind of breaks up the money here where you can see the annual managed services, the margin that you're going to receive from that, as well as the deployment. And when you quantify the 5-year revenue impact and where you're going to be making the most money, This shows you, again, just like you've been doing in your traditional businesses, managed services are the key to the highest amount of revenue. Channel incentives are going to provide some deliverables right there, but then you've also got the deployment costs that you're going to get. You'll notice here that we haven't really talked about inside of this particular pie chart the margin that you're going to get received from Azure. So this is purely just on incentives as well as managed services and your deployment costs. Yep.
So right now, I mean, it's only 13% that we're getting
Right.
a savings on. So where are the rest of the channels?
So as long, if you sign up for the VAR incentive, and anyone from the Microsoft team can help you do that, you'll receive an automatic 8% on any Microsoft Azure deal. So right off the bat, you get your 8 plus your 13. You just have to make sure you're enrolled in it, and you'll get that full 20. There are some other cloud incentives that they've got. I think we're going to have a slide on it at the end of the presentation, but you can receive even more on top of that.
All right, thank you.
Yep. So this is an example right here of an Azure solution and the advantage versus on-premises. In this case right here, you can see that we have hardware cost and the Windows Server cost, as well as some of the overhead that you might have. This is the total cost over 60 months for this one server, right? The monthly cost inside of Azure for the hardware, the Windows Server licenses, and the overhead and the cost to maintain that Windows Server would be about $136.26 versus this $8,173. When we talked about having SQL in the cloud versus SQL on premises or as a platform, take a look at the cost right here to have the same level of SQL performance inside of what you have on premises and the cloud. This includes all the operations, licensing, and so forth. And you see that would be a VM right there or a database platform that would only be $285. So the monthly cost would be $421 versus the total cost right here over 60 months of that $25,000 that you see for that. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm spacing out here. This is I'm completely this is the monthly cost right here of just the on-premises version. Okay, right. So this would be if you break this up. I'm mixing up my slides here. So this would be the monthly cost right here of this right here. And so here's the Azure Advantage. Apologize, I hadn't built out the slide. So the monthly cost right here for Microsoft Azure is $129. The SQL Server cost would be $225. The total cost of the Azure Advantage right here is $354. So you see some savings of $15.88%. So what does that? Can someone multiply just so I can see the 60 months? What's 354 times 60? 21,240. Okay. Here's another solution right here. Actually, this is showing a little bit of a different scenario right here with the SQL cost, and you can see right here that this is okay. So this right here is when you're using VMs but not using them 24/7. You're fixing the cost right here and only using for about 12 hours during business hours and then turning them off. You can see there's a significant savings cost because you're not actually running them full time.
Where we're going to make our money is on still doing managed services on the Azure. So there's still cost over there for our management of it too.
Right,
and
right.
You're including it on one side, but you're not including it on the
Well,
other side.
no. What we're saying right here is that, the hope is with Microsoft Azure that your overhead costs are not going to be as much. And I guess I didn't put the slide together specifically, but I guess you could add some dollars to overhead. But in the case of what they're talking about for overhead here is maintenance of the servers. You're not going to have to maintain these servers or fix these servers, right? Microsoft's going to take care of all that maintenance to the physical servers. There's the monitoring of the server to make sure that it's always up and running. Microsoft's going to be doing most of that stuff. Now, when you do infrastructure as a service and you do have to do some of the patches and things like that, you'll notice that they're not including that inside of this particular slide. They're talking about utilities. You don't have to pay for any of the, you don't have to pay for the electricity or the cooling for that particular server. You don't have to pay for any additional taxes on the cost of the hardware, the Windows Server, because that's all included inside. So there are a number of overhead costs right here that they're referring to, not necessarily managed services. Yeah.
To me, numbers like that, that's some kind of average, mean, median, some kind of statistic they come up with.
Yeah.
And doesn't reflect in a typical small business geographically. I mean, some of it comes out of corporate world where their costs are much higher.
Right.
And that's the variable in there that, quite frankly, I don't believe in
Yeah.
most of the small businesses I deal with. So It doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do for other reasons, but I
Right.
just think the numbers.
Right.
add up.
Again, these are just examples, just scenarios where they've seen these types of numbers over a number of different customers. But you know, remember, your mileage may vary across everything when it comes to the cloud. Your mileage may vary when someone might have 25 users and they might only need a small VM in order to do Active Directory. Someone might have all these applications are always authenticating the Active Directory domain controller, and you need a bigger server. So everything is kind of variable here. This is just kind of giving you an example that you can try to compare against your customers. So for example, use this type of solution when you're trying to upsell or trying to position Azure to an end customer and say, hey, you know what? You have a server that has four cores, or it's using 50 gigs of RAM or 60, whatever, and then try to see if that's going to be a better scenario for them. All right. So I think we're about, on time. What I wanted to do was kind of ask everyone here if they had any questions about Microsoft Azure before we kind of got into this pitch off.
Like back in the day, they had like Action Pack to get you going with on-premise service.
Yep.
What's the resources available to a reseller to kind of get your feet wet and understand how to really sell this? And
Thanks for asking that question. So how do I get started? How do I try to play around with Microsoft Azure? JJ showed me kind of all this stuff. Well, first of all, you can all go to Microsoft Azure and you can get 30-day free trial and check it out and play around with it. However, if you want to do this a little bit more long term, if you sign up for a Microsoft Action Pack, you'll get $100 of internal use rights per month that you can use to run Microsoft Azure in your own business, test things out, show to customers. It's not something that, if you're using a small VM, and extending that to Azure, like playing around with extending Active Directory, you can probably get away with that. But if you're starting to do multiple services, you're going to run out of the $100 pretty quickly. So how do I get more? If you get more competencies, and I'll talk about competencies a little bit later on, you will be able to get more and more internal use rights directly from Microsoft. Yep.
How does the open price level compare with EA? Because we have, in California, we have local government who can buy under EA. They aggregate. So most time, even though they're very small, they buy EA agreement.
Okay.
So we want to know how it compares, because we can only sell open.
Okay. So from an enterprise agreement to versus open, from a margin standpoint, like I said, for you, it's like 3 to 12%. But in terms of the actual price that the end customer pays, I'd have to do some more research for you because I don't know from a government standpoint. Unless do you happen to know anything about EAs in government? Yeah, so we'd have to take a look. I don't know an answer on that. Chris.
Who would be a good person to talk to about a backup scenario where you're doing off-site backup replication for clients to get a little bit more detailed about how pricing and trying to calculate
Yeah.
that kind of
So
stuff?
the good news is that we have just hired an Azure solution consultant at Tech Data. So that person, his name is Randall Crippen. He is our Azure solution consultant. We're really proud to have him on the team. He'll be able to help, email him your solution or scenario, and we'll try to figure out exactly how to get that going. All right. So what I want to do here is we want to make sure that you guys are able to take a quick break. I know you heard a lot from Maritza and I this morning, but within the next 30 minutes, what I'm hoping that you guys can do is team up together. Okay, so turn to the person that's kind of next to you, and I want you to take a look at this and think about some of these scenarios right here and talk about these scenarios with each other. The first one is you have an SMB customer who is currently running Windows Server 2003 on old hardware. How might you have a conversation about pitching Azure to that particular customer? The second one is you've got an SMB startup. It's growing rapidly, and they're not sure whether or not they want to move their infrastructure on premises or move it to the cloud. So these are just two scenarios I want you to talk about between yourselves. And then if you do have an actual opportunity, talk about that. Pitch an actual opportunity to each other that you guys are trying to win, and maybe you guys can come up with a solution. So what's going to happen is at about what time do I have right here? So at about 10:45, what I'd like to do is hopefully you guys have spoken in that time. I know it's going to be a short break, but 10:45, come back. We're going to take 3 volunteers, if you would like, and we're going to have those 3 volunteers come up here and pitch one of these scenarios or a made-up scenario to one of us, Justin, Maritza, Johnny, or myself, and then we will pick a winner out of that particular pitch.